They changed my medication. Without telling me. Without asking me. I found out from a stranger. The pharmacist looked at me for a moment too long. Not a long pause. Maybe 2 seconds. But I have lived 71 years, and I know the difference between someone searching for a pill bottle and someone searching for words. She found the careful smile first. The kind people use when they're about to say something they're afraid of saying. Mrs. Eleanor. She kept her eyes on her screen. Are you aware that your prescription was changed last month? Something cold moved through me. Not panic. Not anger. Just cold. Change. I said. By whom? She hesitated. Looked at me, then back at her screen. Then back at me again. Like she was deciding something. It appears your daughter called the office. She spoke directly with your doctor. I nodded. Slowly. The way you nod when you need your face to stay completely still while your heart moves. I see, I said. Thank you. I put the new prescription in my purse. Walked out. Got in my car. And I sat in that parking lot for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time. Not crying. Not calling anyone. Just sitting very still, letting the understanding settle over me like cold water. Slowly, completely, until there was nothing dry left. My daughter had called my doctor. Without telling me. Had described things, said things about me. To make that happen. And in that parking lot, in the quiet of that afternoon, I started wondering something I didn't want to wonder. How long had this been going on? And what exactly had she said? I want to go back. Not far. Just to a few years ago. Because you need to understand one thing before this story makes sense. I started pretending. Not lying. Not performing. Just softening the edges of myself. My oldest daughter Margaret had started coming around more. Calling more. Showing up with groceries I didn't need. Taking over small tasks I was perfectly capable of doing myself. At first it annoyed me. I'd spent 40 years being the capable one. The one who handled things quietly. The one who never asked for help. But something strange happened. It felt good. Having someone fuss over me felt like water after a long thirst. So I let small things slide. Mentioned a jar that was hard to open. Hesitated over a name I knew perfectly well. Watched her face light up when she felt useful. I knew what I was doing. I told myself. I was simply letting someone love me in the way they needed to love. I should have noticed it then. The way she started reporting these little moments to other people. The way she started leaning into them more than I intended. But I didn't notice. Or maybe I didn't want to. That was my first mistake. I drove home from the pharmacy on autopilot. Margaret's car was already in the driveway. Of course it was. She'd taken to stopping by most afternoons. I had encouraged this. That now felt like a thing I needed to reconsider. She was in the kitchen. She'd made tea. She always made tea, as if the ritual of it could make a check-in feel like a visit. "Mama," she said warmly. "You're back. How was the pharmacy?" I looked at her face. 44 years I had been reading that face. I knew every version of it. The guilty face, the relieved face, the hiding something face. She was wearing the hiding something face. Covered smoothly, expertly, by the warm and welcoming face. But it was there. "Fine," I said. "They had everything ready." "Good, good." She handed me my tea. "I was thinking I might stay for dinner." "That would be lovely," I said. And I sat at my own kitchen table, and I said nothing. Not one word about the prescription. Not one word about the pharmacist's careful smile, or the 22 minutes in the parking lot. Because something had shifted in me on that drive home. And she didn't know it yet. That night, after she left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat at my old writing desk, the one with the sticky drawer, the one my husband bought me for our 20th anniversary, and I opened a notebook. My hands were steadier than I expected. I wrote down everything I could remember. Dates. Conversations. Things I had noticed but hadn't paid proper attention to. The meeting with my accountant, 4 months ago. Margaret had insisted on coming. She'd asked questions I hadn't authorized her to ask, and I'd let it pass because I was pretending not to notice things. The phone call I'd half heard 3 months ago. She'd been in my hallway, speaking quietly, thinking I was in the other room. I'd caught only pieces. But one piece I caught was the word assets. I wrote it down. The casual mention, 2 months ago, of a friend who knew a good elder law attorney. She hadn't explained why she brought it up. Changed the subject almost immediately. I wrote that down too. Then I opened my computer and looked up the new medication. It took 11 minutes. I had to read the page twice. The medication Margaret had convinced my doctor to prescribe was used for, among other things, symptoms of mild cognitive decline. I set my reading glasses down and stared at the wall. I did not have mild cognitive decline. I had been softening myself deliberately, selectively, and apparently my daughter had been documenting those softenings, reporting them, building something with them. The cold feeling from the parking lot came back. But this time it had a shape. I closed the computer, went to bed, lay awake for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, running it all back through my mind, wondering if I was reading too much into it, wondering if there was another explanation. There wasn't. I knew there wasn't. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, in the dark quiet of my bedroom, in the house I had owned for 30 years, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not even a loud one, inside my own head. Just a decision. I want to be fair to Margaret. I think that matters, being fair even now. She is not a villain. She has never been simple enough for that. Even as a child she was the organizer, the manager, the one who made sure everything went a certain way. There is love inside that. Real love. The kind that expresses itself through overseeing, arranging, ensuring. But love that needs to control eventually stops asking permission. And love that stops asking permission eventually stops seeing the person it loves. That's what happened. She had looked at me. Aging, widowed, occasionally forgetful in the small ways I had carefully performed. And she had decided I was a problem to manage, not a person to respect. The medication wasn't the plan. It was the evidence that a plan existed. Once I understood that, I started watching differently. The way she moved through my house, casually, like a woman in her own space. Opening cabinets without asking. Moving small things around. Lingering in rooms she had no reason to be in. The way she talked about me when she was on the phone, not realizing I could hear. Mom gets confused sometimes. She's not really tracking things the way she used to. I'm handling it. She was building a record. I understood that now. Slow and careful, with love as the cover story, she was constructing a case. That her mother was declining. That her mother couldn't be trusted to manage her own affairs. That someone else needed to step in. And once that record was solid enough, she would take it somewhere official. A judge would see a devoted daughter, managing a struggling mother. They would not see what I was seeing. They would not see the plan. For 3 days after that realization, I couldn't eat a full meal. That's what I don't say in the clean version of this story. I sat at my kitchen table in the mornings, holding my coffee, stomach tight, running through scenarios I didn't want to run through. What if I was wrong? What if I confronted her and it turned out I'd misread everything, and she went to the doctor and said, "See, this is exactly what I was worried about"? The trap of it. The awful, elegant trap of it was that any reaction I had could be used against me. So I couldn't react. Not yet. I had to be careful. More careful than I had been in years. More careful, honestly, than I had believed I still needed to be. I called Patricia the following Sunday. As usual. My youngest. 3 states away. We talked every week, and those calls had always been honest in a way the others weren't. I waited until the comfortable part of our conversation, after her kids, her garden, the ordinary details of her week, and then I said, Patricia, I need to tell you something. I need you to listen without reacting. A pause. Mama, she said carefully, you're scaring me. Don't be scared. Be steady. I need you steady right now. And I told her. All of it. The prescription, the pharmacist, what I'd found out, the notes I'd been keeping, the pattern I believed I could see. The silence on her end was long. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. How long have you suspected something was wrong? A while, I admitted. Why didn't you? Because I wasn't certain enough, I said. And you know why I had to be certain before I said a word. She knew. Because Patricia understood, maybe better than anyone, what accusing Margaret without proof would look like. It would look exactly like what Margaret had been describing to people. An elderly woman, confused, paranoid, turning on the family members who were only trying to help. What do you need from me? She asked. That was always Patricia's right question. Nothing yet, I said. Just know. And stay steady. 3 weeks of watching. 3 weeks of tea and polite conversation. And pretending to be exactly the woman Margaret thought I was. It took everything I had some days. Not the watching. The watching was actually something I was good at, had always been. Good at. What took something was the warmth. Keeping the warmth in my face when she walked through my door. When she picked up papers from my desk and casually put them down. When she stayed 20 minutes longer than necessary, and I knew exactly why. I bought a small recording device during that time. I want you to understand, this was not who I am, or who I had been anyway. I had never been someone who prepared for legal battles, who gathered evidence, who protected herself from her own child. But I was beginning to understand that the woman I had been, warm, trusting, deliberately soft, had made it very easy for this to happen. And the woman I needed to be now required a different set of tools. So yes, small device. Fit in the pocket of my gray cardigan. I wore the cardigan every time she visited. And I waited. The Sunday it all came to the surface was an ordinary afternoon. Margaret had brought David, which was unusual. David came at holidays, at birthdays, at the important occasions. Not random Sundays. They called it a family lunch. Brought food from the Italian place we used to go to when the children were small. The smell of it was painfully familiar. I noticed that. We ate. We talked. Everything was careful and warm and slightly too orchestrated. Then Margaret folded her hands on the table in that particular way she has, composed, prepared, and she said, Mama, David and I have been talking, and we're worried. About what? I asked. Lightly. About you. She looked at David. He nodded, but his eyes slid slightly to the side. Not quite meeting mine. That told me something about David. We think things have been getting harder for you, Margaret continued. Managing everything. The house, the finances, the medical things. We think it might be time to talk about arrangements. Arrangements. I let the word sit in the air for a moment. What kind of arrangements? I asked. Just support. Legal support. A power of attorney, just to make things easier. She paused. For everyone. Easier for everyone. Whose idea was this? I asked. We talked about it together. Margaret. My voice did not change in volume. Just in something underneath the volume. Whose idea? A small silence. Then, barely perceptible, David glanced at his sister. There was my answer. I've been speaking with someone, Margaret said. A professional. Someone who deals with these situations. Just for advice. An elder law attorney, I said. And now her face did change. Just slightly. She had not expected me to know that term. Just for advice, she repeated. Just to understand our options. Our options. My hands were folded in my lap. Very still. I could feel the weight of the small device in my left pocket. What does our mean? I asked, in this context. It means the family, Mama. We want to take care of you. I see. I nodded. And what does taking care of me look like in this arrangement? She told me. Power of attorney. Oversight of my financial decisions. Ongoing management of my medical care. Coordinated with my doctor, she said carefully. And eventually, possibly, a move to somewhere more manageable. Not a nursing home, she said. Nothing like that. Just something easier. I listened to every word. Did not interrupt once. And when she was done, in the silence that followed, David cleared his throat very quietly. What if I say no? I asked. Something shifted in Margaret's face. Just a flicker of something she didn't mean to show. Mama. I'm asking a real question. What happens if I say no? She was quiet for a moment. Then carefully. We would have to look at other options. Other options. I had thought I was ready for this conversation. I had prepared for it, rehearsed it, told myself I knew what was coming. But hearing it said in my kitchen, at the table where I had eaten 10,000 meals, where I had helped with homework and held my children through the hard things. Hearing it said out loud by my own daughter's careful, loving voice, that landed somewhere I hadn't protected. I sat with it for one breath. Two. Then I said, thank you for explaining. I need some time to think. And I stood up. Very steadily. I'm a little tired now. Thank you so much for the food. They left. They didn't want to. Margaret lingered by the door with an expression I could see she was working hard to control. Something between guilt and calculation, and something that might have actually been love, all three at once. I closed the door, locked it, and stood in my own hallway, in the quiet. I allowed myself 5 minutes. Exactly 5. The grief of it. The sheer lonely grief of it. Not the betrayal. I'd had weeks to understand the betrayal. But the simpler, older pain underneath. I had made myself small, so that someone would choose to stay close. And the person who stayed close had decided to use my smallness. That was what I let myself feel for 5 minutes. Then I straightened up. And I made a phone call. Dr. Anita Rowe was a geriatric specialist. I'd found her through my friend Dolores, whose opinion I trusted more than almost anyone's. I made the appointment myself. Told no one. When I walked into her office I was, to be honest, more nervous than I expected. There's something about sitting down in front of a stranger, and having to prove your own mind that unsettles you in ways you don't anticipate. Even when you know the truth. Even when you're certain. What if she agreed with Margaret? What if the forgetting I'd been performing had actually, in some small real way, started to become real? I sat down. She asked questions. Many questions in many forms over nearly 2 hours. At the end she sat back in her chair and regarded me with an expression I recognized after a moment. It was respect. Mrs. Eleanor, she said, you are one of the sharpest 71-year-olds I have examined in quite some time. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. I need that in writing, please, I said. She blinked once, then smiled. I'll have a full report ready within the week. Sandra, the attorney, had gray hair cut close and a way of speaking that wasted nothing. I had found her the same way I found Dr. Rowe. Through my own research, my own phone calls, nobody's recommendation but my own judgment. The first time I sat across from her desk, I laid everything out. The notebook, the recording device, and yes, by then I had several recordings from Margaret's visits, one of which included a phone call she'd made from my living room that she thought I couldn't hear. I brought Dr. Rowe's report. The timeline. The documentation of the prescription change. Sandra read through all of it without speaking. The silence stretched. 5 minutes. Maybe longer. I sat very still and waited, aware that what she said next could go one of two ways. Either I had something real and actionable, or I had the organized worries of a woman who had perhaps, in some small way, started to misread the people around her. If it was the second one, I needed to know that too. She looked up. Mrs. Eleanor, have you told your daughter any of this? No, I said. Do you want to confront her? No. I want protection. There's a difference. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. An assessment. Then let's build you protection, she said. She drafted documents. I signed. She filed. Not power of attorney in anyone else's hands, quite the opposite. Legal documents establishing my cognitive competence in the clearest possible terms, supported by Dr. Rowe's evaluation. A medical directive naming Patricia, only Patricia, as my designated representative in any future matter. A will, updated and airtight. Documents that told a very different story than the one Margaret had been constructing. I updated my doctor too. Went back alone one morning, without telling anyone. Sat across from him and explained calmly that my daughter had been calling his office without my knowledge, and that going forward, my medical information was mine. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I should have called you directly. I should have verified. Yes, I said simply. You should have. He updated my records, restored my original prescription, noted in my file that I was to be contacted directly and only. A locksmith came that Friday and changed the garage code. Small thing. But Margaret had known the old one. She came on a Thursday, about 3 weeks after the Sunday lunch. The calls and visits had continued, warm, steady, slightly more frequent than before. I understood now that the frequency was monitoring. I let her in, made tea, sat at the table. She seemed, underneath the warmth, underneath all that careful composure, tightly wound, waiting for something. She'd expected me to yield by now, I think. To come to her, confused and frightened, asking for guidance. That was not what she got. Mama, she said, picking up her cup. Have you thought any more about what David and I discussed? I have, I said. And I set down my cup. I've seen a doctor. A specialist. She's provided a written evaluation of my cognitive and mental health. Copies have been filed with my attorney. The cup stopped halfway to her mouth. I've retained legal counsel. I continued. My affairs are in order. My will, my medical directives, my financial arrangements, all updated, all filed, all legally documented. She opened her mouth. I haven't finished, I said gently. She closed it. I know what you've been planning. I don't say that with anger. I looked at her steadily. I say it because I need you to understand clearly, it won't work. The record you've been building, the prescription change, the doctor's calls, the reports of confusion, it's all been addressed. Any legal move to pursue guardianship will be met with documentation that tells a very different story. The color had drained from her face. I also have recordings, I said. Quietly, almost as an afterthought. Recordings. Her voice came out strange. Too high. Of several conversations. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was the longest one of that whole story. She sat very still across from me, and I watched something work through her. Not just surprise, but the specific disorientation of a person who thought they understood a situation, and has just discovered they were the one who didn't. Mama, I wasn't trying to. You were, I said. Not harshly. I think you convinced yourself it was love. Some of it was. I know that. Her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. But you went behind my back, I said. You changed my medication without my consent. You spoke to attorneys about taking legal control of my life. You did all of this while drinking tea in my kitchen and acting as though nothing was happening. And you had been doing it for a long time before I found out. A tear slid down her face. She didn't try to stop it. I would like you to leave now, I said. And I need some time. Mama, please. Her voice cracked on the word. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. Those are different things. I walked her to the door. She stopped on the threshold and turned back once. Her face in that moment. I don't know. I still don't know entirely what I saw in it. Shame. Grief. Something that was genuinely, unmistakably love. Tangled up inside all the wrong of it. The love was real. I closed the door. David called that evening. Mom, he said. His voice was rough in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. I want you to know. I didn't fully understand what she was doing. I thought it was just about helping. I know, I said. A long pause. I could hear him breathing, working up to something. Should I have asked you directly? Before any of this? Should I have? I keep thinking if I had just called you and talked to you, like a normal person. Yes, I said. You should have. I know that. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you are. Another silence. Then more quietly. Are you okay? And I mean really. I'm quite well, I said. Thank you for asking. Can we talk? Just us sometime soon? Not about any of this. Just talk. Something in my chest shifted a little at that. Yes, I said. I'd like that. And I meant it. David's wrong had been smaller. The wrong of going along, of not asking, of following someone else's lead without stopping to think. That kind of wrong, I understand. Forgiveness for that kind of wrong comes more easily. Margaret was different. Margaret's wrong had been deliberate, sustained, and built on something that had looked like love from the outside. That would take longer. Maybe we'd find our way back. Maybe. Patricia came the following month. She drove the whole way up, which she almost never does. When she walked in and saw me standing in the hallway, she held me for a long time without saying a word. Then she stepped back and looked at my face. You really are okay, she said. Slightly surprised maybe. Or maybe what she meant was, you're more than okay. Better than okay, I said. We made dinner together that evening. Her at the stove, me cutting things on the old wooden board. Garlic, something in the oven. The kitchen smelled warm and ordinary and exactly like itself. At some point in a comfortable quiet she said, Can I ask you something? Of course. The forgetting. The jar you couldn't open. All that. You were doing it on purpose, weren't you? I was quiet for a moment. The knife moved. I was lonely, I said finally. Not for help. For someone to want to be close. And I thought, if I needed them they'd come. If I just wanted them, maybe they wouldn't. Patricia didn't say anything for a moment. You should have just asked me, she said softly. I know. You could have called me and said, I'm lonely, come visit, and I would have come. I know that now. Mama. I know, I said again. Softer. It was foolish. It wasn't foolish, she said. It was human. I looked at her, my youngest, my steady one, standing at my stove in my kitchen. And something loosened in me that had been held tight for a very long time. I think, I said slowly, I'm going to stop pretending about things. She smiled. Good. On both ends. I'm going to stop pretending to be weaker than I am. And I'm going to stop pretending I don't need anything. That's a lot of honesty. I'm 71, I said. I think I've earned the right to just be the actual amount of things. She laughed. And I laughed. And outside my kitchen window the evening was settling in gold and ordinary quiet over my street. My street. My window. My kitchen. Still mine. I want to say something about what strength actually looked like during those weeks. Because people think strength looks like fighting. Raised voices, doors slamming. The dramatic moment when everything is finally said out loud. Sometimes it does. Sometimes that's what's needed and right. But sometimes strength looks like sitting in a parking lot for 22 minutes. It looks like going home and making tea and saying nothing. It looks like opening a notebook with steady hands. It looks like being afraid, genuinely afraid, lying awake at 2 in the morning running through worst-case scenarios, and doing the next necessary thing anyway. It looks like walking into a specialist's office terrified she might agree with your daughter, and sitting still while she asks you difficult questions, and letting out the breath when the answer comes. It looks like sitting across from your own child. Someone you love, someone you raised, someone whose face you have known since the first moment of her life, and speaking clearly, without cruelty about what they did. That was the gift of it, finally. Not, hey,